Thanks for joining us today. Today we have Tiffany Bishop here. She's going to be talking about effective strategies for scaling your group practice. For those of you who are not familiar with myself, my name is Katie. I am the Director of Customer Success and Operations here at Checkpoint EHR, and I'm going to be your host for today's session. So we are excited to have both Checkpoint customers and non-Checkpoint customers joining us. So whether you're a solo provider thinking about growing into a group practice, or maybe you're already scaling and feeling some of that operational strain that comes with growth, today's session is designed to meet you where you are. Okay. So a few quick housekeeping items before we get started. This session is being recorded, and the recording will be emailed to everyone who's registered. There will be a Q&A at the end, so feel free to drop your questions into the Q&A chat, and I'll be posting some things in there shortly, so you should see the pop-up so you can see where it's at. Sometimes folks can't find the QA, and so they use the chat. That's fine. Just keep in mind with the chat, there's no approval on that, so just don't post any HIPAA or anything like that in there. Okay. But yeah, so we'll try to reserve a little bit of time at the end for those Q&As. But yeah, in general, again, today's session, for those of you just joining us, is led by Tiffany Bishop. She is the founder of CNS Administrative Solutions. Tiffany works closely with behavioral health practices across the country, helping them scale in ways that are financially sound, operationally sustainable, and realistic for the work that humans do. Okay. So we are grateful to have her here with us today. Tiffany, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Katie. Quick clarification, not the founder of CNS, but I do work with them. So just in case some of them watch, I want to be sure that they know I'm not trying to steal their glory or anything. But yeah, a huge thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I'm excited to dive deeper into strategies for group practices. And yeah, I feel like this is applicable to both those who want to grow into group practices and those who are already in the midst of their group practices. And so it can kind of be helpful for both sectors. So we're going to get started with, I want to introduce myself a little bit and my story. So as a little girl, I always dreamed of making the world a better place. Didn't really know what that looked like. In high school, I discovered social work and was immediately drawn to it. I started college and that was my planned major, but things shifted, changed. It didn't end up being my major. I majored in something similar. And then after I graduated college, there were several times that I almost went back to school to get a master's in social work. Actually, I took the prereq courses, but timing was always a little off or it just didn't feel right. And then several years ago, I connected with a mental health clinician she was a solo provider and she wanted to grow into a group practice. And I took on the role as her assistant. And then as her practice grew, so did I. So at one point, I joined a couple Facebook groups thinking that if I ever had questions on the admin side of things or about our EHR that we were using, I could use these groups to ask questions and get feedback. But I quickly actually became one of the people answering everybody else's questions. And so then I started to have providers reach out to me for assistance and help. And I saw that there was this massive knowledge gap in how group practices are actually built and sustained. So then I ended up starting my own Facebook group with the original owner that hired me as an assistant for group practice owners. We wanted a space where group practice owners could collaborate with each other. And that group has grown to almost 9,000 members. And it's become really a space where group practices owners are able to fill that knowledge gap that they were finding before. In addition to helping providers in group practices, I also spent some time working for a mental health EHR, and that gave me an even more in-depth knowledge as I was able to see things from a different angle and another side. I'm deeply passionate about mental health, but I've realized that my strengths don't lie in being a social worker. They lie in helping social workers and other mental health clinicians build strong, sustainable, and profitable practices. That allows them to focus more on their clients. And I love this little niche that I've found. And I've now worked with hundreds, I was trying to count it, possibly thousands of practices, kind of at every growth stage. So this is where my knowledge has been built up over the years. So I just want to start with kind of this reframe that structure is what creates sustainable growth. This applies to those already with group practices, those looking to expand and scale, and those just starting out their group practice journey. There are 4 systems that determine whether growth feels empowering or punishing. So those 4 systems that matter are the goal system, the money system, the operation system, and the culture system. If even one of these lags behind, growth is going to become an expensive chaos. So let's start with the first one, your goal system. Many growth goals are emotional, but sustainable growth is mathematical. I'll go into more depth into each of these on the next slide, but I'm going to give a brief overview. So your capacity limits, depending upon your number of clinicians, your average weekly sessions, your no-show rates, your physical rooms that you have available, your supervisors, there is a ceiling that your practice will hit. Every practice has a ceiling, whether they've calculated it or not. So as you're making your goals, are your goals aligned with this capacity ceiling that you have? Supervision load, every clinician you add doesn't just add revenue, they add supervision hours, compliance risks, documentation review, onboarding, questions, and emotional labor. Appointment math, depending upon insurance or self-pay rates, you will get paid for more for some clients over others. Additionally, some clients have a higher no-show rate. Is this being calculated in when setting up your goals? And then the 4th kind of thing to consider is the reimbursement reality. Insurance pays on their timeline, not yours. Unfortunately, I still have plans to kind of figure out how to fix that. But for now, that is the reality. So here's the math that most practices never calculate. Going back to capacity limits, all of these contribute to your ceiling limit. Here's some math. First, take your no-show rate as a percentage and subtract it from 1. For example, if your practice averages 10% no-shows, then you would do 1 minus 0.1, which would equal 0.9. Multiply that 0.9 by the number of clinicians in the practice and the average weekly sessions per clinician. Use real historical averages, not your ideal, and include part-time clinicians as fractions of a full-time equivalent. This will give you an idea of your capacity ceiling. Set your growth goals in line with this number. Once again, not an emotional goal, but an actual realistic math goal. Next is supervision load. Ask yourself these questions. How many supervision hours do I have? How many clinicians can those hours realistically support? Supervisors have real limits. Supervision time steals from owner clinical hours and business leadership time. Growth is going to quietly convert your time into admin labor. So as an example, hiring 3 clinicians might increase your revenue by 30%, but it could increase your supervision load by 100%. So that kind of needs to be factored in when making your growth goals. As you set growth goals for your practice, cap your hiring at supervision capacity, not client demand. And then appointment math. Build goals on billable sessions, not scheduled ones. So if you schedule 250 sessions per week, but 20% cancel or no-show, you only have 200 billable sessions. You must build your goals on billing reality, not perfect schedules. And then reimbursement reality, like I said, insurance pays on their own timeline. So always assume new clinicians won't generate real cash for 60 to 90 days. You're going to have credentialing delays, claim aging, denials, retroactive adjustments. And so as you set your goals, you need to keep all of these in mind. You may have a goal, I want to have this amazing group practice. Great. Do the math for all of these different factors, and that's where you can then firm down what your goals are. When you are scaling for growth, set aside a minimum of 2 months of operating expenses before hiring. This goes along with the reimbursement reality. Our second system is the money system. Some of this I just addressed under reimbursement realities, but there are 3 money realities that determine whether growth creates profit or pressure. First, revenue does not equal cash. You can grow your revenue on paper by $30,000 a month and still feel broke because that money might live in pending claims. Second, growth is going to create a cash lag. Growth introduces expenses immediately. Reimbursement introduces cash slowly. And then third, you're going to have new expenses with each hire. I mentioned this earlier, but it's worth reiterating. Insurance pays later, expenses pay now. This reality needs to be built into your system. As you grow, not all of your payments and income keep up with you. As you hire, there can be credentialing delays. Additionally, many practices deal with claim aging, denials, and reprocessing and retroactive rate charges. As your practice grows, you also need to be aware of these costs that will continue to increase: your billing labor, your software creep, supervision and admin time, and payroll before payment. So here's how to scale without breaking your cash flow. First, practice owners should have 60 to 90 days of operating cash. So when budgeting, have a separate growth cost budget column. So this, once again, this is going to include your software creep. As you have more clinicians, your software is going to cost more. This will also cover the group practice owner having less clinical times because they're giving more times to supervision and admin time, increasing the payments towards admin, whether they increase their hours or you hire more. And then finally, someone needs to own your claims weekly. Every week you're having a aging claim review so that those are being stayed on top of. The money has to be there to be profitable. And so these are the things that you kind of need to have set up now before you hire, or if you're in the middle of your group practice, get these set up so that you can grow more. Next, we have the operations. Admin is not overhead in my mind. It is your growth engine. It's the invisible machine that is running the practice. Every clinician you add creates a shadow business underneath them. And that shadow business has admin needs, deadlines, and compliance risk. You're not just hiring a clinician to see clients. There are a lot of other things that happen in the background when you hire a clinician. So when a practice owner hires someone, they're not hiring one person. They're hiring credentialing, intake, billing, payroll, compliance, documentation review, supervision, coordination. So many practices try to scale clinical capacity without scaling admin capacity, and the result is delayed cash, missed deadlines, and owner burnout. As your practice grows, without efficient operation systems in place, you will find your practice will bottleneck somewhere. So think about these questions. Where do claims get stuck? What slows down onboarding? What delays credentialing? What creates rework? Your growth ceiling is hidden inside your slowest admin step. So practice owners need to fix this bottleneck before hiring again. Once again, with those questions of figuring out where's our slowest admin step in credentialing, claims, onboarding, other things like that. So I have under this the fixed stage-based admin layers. Here's an operational ladder that many successful practices follow. If you're a solo provider looking to grow, before you hire, make sure you have documented workflows in place. Stage 1 admin means documented workflows, a clean EHR, and defined billing processes. Not just, I know how it works. That's not going to help you when you grow. If you have 1 to 3 clinicians, before growing, you should have someone taking on a part-time role for billing and admin. As you continue to grow, you need a full person dedicated to billing and onboarding. Once you are past 8 providers, if you have built upon the previous layers, you will now be ready for a team of admin, with 1 person leading the billing, credentialing, and operations. If you're at stage 3, which is that 4 to 7 clinicians, with stage 1 admin, growth is going to feel punishing. It's going to cause burnout for the owner. It's not going to be profitable. So you need to systemize before you hire. Tell yourself this: no hiring happens without documented workflows. If your business feels fragile, it's most likely not your clients or your clinicians. It's your operation system asking for structure. The last of the 4 systems is culture. Culture is your invisible compliance system. I want to reframe how we think about culture. Culture isn't about vibe. It's about what happens when you're not in the room. Culture determines how notes are written, how deadlines are treated, how feedback is received, how problems are escalated, how long good clinicians stay. When your growth outpaces your culture, confusion turns into resentment, and resentment turns into turnover. And there's always a profit loss when you have clinician turnover. Culture problems are almost never personality problems. They are missing systems. So when culture is weak, you'll see missed documentation deadlines, uneven performance, emotional exhaustion, passive compliance, and silent burnout. So here are some ways to set up your practice for success with a good culture system. Some questions to think about. What does good performance actually mean here? What is the turnaround time for notes? What is the response expectation? When you know those answers, put it in writing. Not to be harsh, but to actually be kind. Every practice needs clear and defined documentation standards. Define note deadlines. Define quality expectations. Define correction procedures. Consistency protects everyone. Then use accountability rhythms to maintain your practice's culture. Are you doing weekly admin checks? Are you doing monthly performance reviews? Do you have clear correction pathways? Predictability creates safety. Turnover leads to loss of profits. Retention protection involves onboarding clarity, clear feedback loops, and emotional boundaries. Culture is a retention system. If you want your practice to have a culture that makes your employees happy, reduces turnover, and keeps you compliant, then be sure to write it down, enforce gently, and repeat consistently. Verbal culture does not scale, but the written culture is able to keep that your system flowing and in a scalable manner. So now I've created this scaling readiness checklist. We've talked about the 4 systems, and I've created this for practice owners to use as a guide. Before your next hire, whether it's your first hire, your 4th hire, your 10th hire, your 20th hire, use this checklist to make sure your systems are in place. So for goals, do you know your weekly appointment capacity? That goes with your capacity ceiling. There's only so much that your practice actually realistically can take on. Do you know your average reimbursement rate? The numbers. Not all clients are created equally. There is math that needs to be calculated. Do you know how many clients one clinician adds to admin workload? And so that once again, the clinician doesn't just bring in clients, it's bringing in all the silent admin background. And is your growth goal based on math? For money, do you have a budget set aside for growth? That's software creep, credentialing delays, claim aging. Do you track claim aging and stay on top of those? Do you have a 60 to 90-day cash buffer to account for credentialing or other delays? Have your 2 to 3 months cash buffer in line before your next hire. And do you know what your real profit margin is? We're not counting ideal billable sessions. We're counting realistic billable sessions. That includes your cancellation rates, and then the various insurance reimbursements. For operations, is your billing system not dependent upon a single person, especially not upon the group owner? Once again, do you have those documented workflows in place so that then if one person leaves or is sick or something happens, or as you grow and you need to grow your admin team, everything is there and documented? And do you have your intake, billing, credentialing, and payroll systems in place? Once again, this can apply to those already in a group practice who are maybe feeling that stress and strain, or those wanting to start off. If you're already in a group practice, before your next hire, focus on these and making sure you have them all in place. And then for culture, are your expectations written down? Are your documentation standards written down? So once again, verbal culture is going to fail you. You want to have it written down and enforce it. Are you consistent in your expectations and accountability? And is your turnover risk low with a solid culture system in place? Once again, once everyone knows the expectations and they're maintained, you're able to get that culture vibe that you want in your practice that will keep your systems working well. In closing, you don't need permission to grow. You can grow as much as you want, but you need systems that won't punish you for growing. A lot of practice owners feel stressed, feel strained. Once you get these systems in place, it obviously does not take away all the stress and strain, but it will make things much more clearer and allow you to grow in a more scalable and efficient manner. And I talked a lot faster than I planned on doing, but that is the end of my presentation.
Yeah, no worries. We got some awesome questions ready to roll. If anyone has any questions, again, feel free to post them in the Q&A. Or if you're having trouble with the Q&A, you can post them in the chat as well. Okay. But yeah, so to start off, when you're working with practices, what's the most common sign that they're trying to grow before they're structurally ready?
I would say the operations side of things, the documented workflows. Otherwise, as they grow, it's all going to still be on the group owner. So the group owner definitely should know how everything is going, but they need to have it written down and have those workflows in place so that it is not all on the group owner. Otherwise, you're taking away from their clinical time. You're adding more admin time, especially if they're hiring associate clinicians and you're adding in supervision time. It will become too much for the practice owner if you don't have your operations documented and how they flow.
Mm-hmm. Great. Is there a certain size or moment when that you see when it typically starts getting harder for that group owner?
Yeah, so well, actually, I think kind of the first several hires are often the hardest. I think once they get usually, because if you don't have a lot of these systems in place, it's just going to get harder and harder. And a lot of group practice owners kind of figure this out as they go, painfully. And I think around where they get to kind of that 8 to 15 clinicians, they're either completely broken and it's not working, or they finally have kind of hit a sweet spot, which is right where, Checkpoint EHR is right, that sweet spot for those 8 to 15 clinician practices also. But it seems like the growing pains actually happen the most at the beginning because, like I said, there's this lag, there's this knowledge gap for group practice owners where a lot of them are just kind of trial and error figuring out how to make it work. And so there's so many growing pains at the beginning until they do figure out through trial and error how to make it work.
Awesome. Okay. Let's see. We do have a question from Madison. She said, is there specific software you suggest to help create the workflows, or does it work to do it with something like Excel?
Yeah, I think it's going to be personal preference. So I'm a fan of Trello. I used Trello at a bigger practice to kind of document workflows, and actually for claim aging, we use that as well. It's not HIPAA compliant, so we had to just use like internal IDs for clients and stuff. But I've also seen people use Notion. And Trello, I used the free version, and Notion, I'm not sure the cost there. I was not as huge of a fan of Notion. But then Excel, I've seen practices use Excel as well.
Yeah, we use Notion here. I'm the opposite. I love Notion. I think it's so great. I think it's like OneNote on like steroids. Like it can do so much. But yeah, I would say I would agree. There's all kinds of different tools, and kind of depending on what you're wanting to, track, like, is it like how does information flow? Is it like a client onboarding process, right? Like if you're wanting like a visual or to write it down, or like some organization in Excel.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's all kinds of stuff. Yeah, you definitely got to figure out, just kind of trial and error, get all those free trials, just make sure you cancel them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do feel like sometimes there's so many options out there that it's kind of analysis paralysis, but
Yep.
But yeah, I would say Notion and Trello and Excel are the ones I see used most frequently.
Okay. What would you say is one misconception you see a lot of providers have about scaling?
I think a lot of providers don't fully comprehend that it's not a ginormous moneymaker. It definitely is profitable, can be profitable, but one, you need to be someone who enjoys managing people and enjoys the admin side of things, even though, as you scale, you hopefully hire other people for that, but you still need to oversee them. I think a lot of clinicians come in and they just, I want to make more money, so it makes sense to just hire other clinicians under me. But then they get into it and they're like, oh, this is actually miserable. They're not doing their part. They like, if you make a bad hire, someone who doesn't keep up on notes, and once again, if you don't have those systems in place of accountability, so yeah, I think the biggest misconception is that it's just kind of an easy road to make a lot of money. But it takes systems and planning and conscious effort, and you got to enjoy things beyond the clinician side of things.
Okay, great. So this checklist is great. Do you have like a list of recommended KPIs that go with this? So like internally we use KPIs to help confirm that like our objectives are being accomplished. So do you have any recommended KPIs?
Yeah, so like I've mentioned multiple times, the weekly claim aging, kind of keeping track of that. And then also client retention for each of your clinicians. the turnover of their clients, that's going to be a huge thing you want to address, because once again, clinician turnover can drain your profits, but client turnover also can drain your profits. And so you want to make sure that your clinicians are retaining their clients, and if not, kind of address that and problem solve why that's going on. And so, yeah, that's kind of the culture side of things, is the client retention, and then the money side of things is that weekly claim aging review and staying on top of those. I would say those are the two biggest ones off the top of my head. I'm sure if I gave it a moment to think, I could come up with more, but.
Okay, great. Let's see. We had another question. Where is the best place to look for a billing assistant, and what credentials should I look for?
Ooh, yeah, that's a good question. So, I kind of have two answers here. If you go into like a Facebook group, like I said, I have a Facebook group for group practice owners with 9,000 people in it. There are several billers and assistants in there. So sometimes it's hard because someone will ask for recommendations and everyone will recommend themselves. And so it's like, how do I find someone who is actually like knowledgeable and good? And so some of the skills, I believe all of the assistant work can be taught. So I don't think you necessarily need someone who has experience with that, but you need someone who's really good at problem solving, especially if you are an insurance-based practice. That claim aging review, someone who is good at problem solving, someone who is organized. I would say those are the top two things that you should look for. Like I mentioned at the beginning, I work with CNS Administrative Solutions. They have a great system of VAs that they provide to group practices. I also know that Checkpoint partners with, is it Practice Solutions?
Yeah, so I'll post a link to our vendor directory to your question there, Madison. So we work with Practice Solutions. They're super, super knowledgeable. And one of the things they do as well is they'll also come in and like teach you the ropes. Like, their goal isn't necessarily to just like, if you just want someone to show you how to do it, so then you can reteach it, they're more than happy to do that as well. But yeah, their name is Practice Solutions. And then we also Orbit Billing Solutions as well. They're local here in North Carolina. But yeah, that vendor directory, they might be the first one that comes up, but if you look at the billing categories, there's all kinds of different billing vendors in there. And all of these people we've actually met with. Firsthand on, meet and greets before we put them on the vendor list, just to make sure, our things aligned. But
Yeah. And I will say, I mean, my story is I had a friend who just wanted someone part-time. I was looking for just something part-time. Most of my kids were in school, but I wasn't ready to jump back into full-time work. And so, but like I said, I had those skills where I'm a problem solver and I can be organized. And so that it worked well for me and for the practice owner that we were able to just make that arrangement.
Yeah, I think problem solving is the biggest, because sometimes you got to call and call and call that insurance company, right? So if you
Yeah.
easily give up, not the job for you.
Yes, yes. Well, and
Yeah.
Katie, you come kind of from a billing background also, right?
Yeah, yep. I
Yeah.
got given a ERA and said, "Can you fix these denials?" I don't even know what a claim looks like. What? So yeah, years later, figured it out, I think. But
Yeah.
yeah. Let's see. We have another question from Gabrielle. Said, is it more helpful to have multiple people doing admin/payroll duties as a means of cost savings? And are there drastic downsides of this?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it depends on you as a group practice owner. So I do know some group practice owners who want to own the payroll. And so it's all, what do you want as a group practice owner? Do you still want to be involved in the clinical side and seeing a caseload of clients. If you are, then yes, it's definitely worth it to hire admin to do your payroll and extensive things like that. Because if you think about it, the more clients an owner sees, the more money the practice is going to make. However, if you are in a stage where you like the management of the system and things like that, then I definitely think billing and intake and credentialing and things like that to hire out, but payroll is something that I would say is a give or take depending on the group practice owner, if that answered the question, I believe.
Does scaling operations also include finding ways to scale the referrals to the practice?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, that, yes and no. I think you don't want to hire if you're not getting referrals. So yes, most of the practices I've worked with, the biggest way for referrals is just through word of mouth, and being a good solid practice. Once one group practice kind of knows another group practice is good, or physicians know a group practice is solid and reliable, then they start referring out. And so I've worked with a few practices who do things like Google Ads or really focus on their SEO. But most of them just kind of do the basic level of SEO and things like that. But we found that, yes, so basically, in short, don't scale if you're not getting the referrals in. And so if that is where you're at, then yeah, you will want to increase your referrals. And I know you guys have Michael on your lineup, right? Or you did have him, and he specifically talks about marketing for practices. That's kind of his specialty. And so I believe that's a recorded webinar that you guys have somewhere. So marketing's not my forte per se, but yeah, you might be able to get more information from the webinar with Michael.
I'll post that in the Q&A as well. It has a list of our upcoming webinars, but also the ones for 2025. All the recordings are there as well. Yeah, Michael Fulweiler. If you scroll down to the bottom, he's like the last guy in the middle. See him there. Let's see. What is a reasonable amount to pay a billing assistant?
Ooh, okay. That is also a good question because it's so hard to determine because each state is different and whatnot. So, I mean, I'll just say I started out several years ago at $17 an hour. And I did not have any experience. It was very part-time. But once again, I was a problem solver. Like, I was a good choice, but I didn't come in with a lot of experience. But I know some of these other practice solutions and CNS administrative solutions, they do start at higher rates, but also you are getting a solid already in place system, people who know the EHRs and kind of could probably document these workflows for you. I mean, every practice is going to be slightly different, but they've worked with enough practices and they kind of have a team on the background that then they're able to support one another. But yeah, so that's a one thing that when you're calculating out your budget and your growth budget, you gotta kind of decide what you want. If you're willing to kind of take someone on who's new, who's just a smart hire but not experienced for slightly less, but also know as they increase their hours and their knowledge, you will probably need to increase their pay, or just start out with someone who can get running from the start and can take it from there, who will start at a higher rate.
Yeah, and I know a lot of like, there's a wide range, right? There's like folks that like just work denials. And then there's folks that'll do, they're doing the eligibility checks, checking your authorizations, checking the codes before they go out the door, right? So there's like a wide variety of like what you can pay for.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's also the like the intake, person answering the phone, scheduling the appointments, sending out the paperwork before it starts. And so it also depends upon that, what exactly you want them to do. So I guess that wasn't a very good answer. It was a very broad answer.
Yeah, we need a decision tree.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. For owners who might feel like overwhelmed by numbers, where's the best place for them to start?
Ooh, owners who feel overwhelmed by numbers. That's a good question. I would say if you're overwhelmed with numbers, make yourself more comfortable with numbers. Have the hard money discussions. I'm not a therapist, but I work with a lot of therapists. But that exposure therapy, make yourself comfortable by being uncomfortable. Because I really believe even if you're not doing it yourself, you've hired someone who's doing it, you need to know what they're doing and how to do it. And I had a lot of clinicians hire me to do their billing for a while. And that was kind of even if you don't want to do it, a lot of them hate it. Like, even if you don't want to do it, you need to know what I'm doing. Because once again, you can't be reliable upon one person. And so there are definitely CPAs out there who can get you started and help. There is Green Oak Accounting, which specifically focuses on like billing for mental health practices. However, they do kind of charge a premium because they're good. They're really good. I do know they put out some free webinars as well. And so that might be a good place to start and the nice thing about them is because they work with so many mental health practices, they know the numbers. Like, they have enough experience to say, hey, your practice is kind of lagging in this because other practices are able to do this and this, or your practice is kind of spending too much on this. And because they have that wide variety of mental health practice clients. And so I definitely think a CPA who is experienced with mental health practices. But yeah, get comfortable talking money, get comfortable running the numbers, even if you end up hiring someone to do it in the end.
Yeah. How do you know when a bottleneck is a people problem versus a systems problem?
Ooh, that's a good question. A bottleneck being a people's problem versus a system problem. Yeah, so I think it's going to depend. I think once you identify what the bottleneck is, that might help narrow it down. So some of these, like we said, where do claims get stuck? If you find that claims are not getting submitted daily, or your weekly claim aging review is not happening, things like that, then it's like, okay, this might be a system thing that we need to work into our system, that these need to happen. If you look into onboarding, which can be a slowdown, and it's, we're not getting paperwork in time. I did work for credentialing several providers, and it would be hard because we would hire a new provider and need to credential them as fast as possible, but they would be very slow getting their information to me. And so once again, that could be a workflow system that, like, hey, you need to submit this documentation within a week of accepting the contract to start, because some of them wouldn't get the information to me until their start date, and then they're unable to really start because of we don't have their credentialing in place yet. And then things that are causing rework to be done. those are definitely kind of systems that need help, or that I would focus on. And so, yeah, it could, once again, if you look at culture as your documented workflows and things like that, I think most of the time you are going to find that it's a system thing. Yeah.
Great. All right. Let's see. And I'm not seeing, I think, any more questions come in. So as we wrap up today's webinar, I just got one more question. So if someone takes just one action from today's session in the next 30 days, what would you recommend that be?
Ooh, can I share two? Cheat
Yeah,
and say
sure.
share
Yeah,
two.
yeah, two, even better.
Okay. I would say build up your cash buffer. Would be the first one, and then the second one would be to document your workflows.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
That will be what can help you scale your practice no matter what stage you're at.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Well, Tiffany, thank you again. Yeah, we appreciate you sharing your expertise and walking us through, the framework. And thank you to everyone who joined us. We know, y'all are busy, so we definitely appreciate you spending some of your Wednesday afternoon with us. And as a reminder, everyone that registered will get a copy of this presentation. So you can watch it yourself, you can share it with your team, etc. We'll also include some links with that. Tiffany, if you have any links or anything like that you want to share, we can put our webinars and our vendor directory and things like that in there for you guys as well. But yeah, so we hope today gave you some clarity around where growth might be stretching your systems, and how structure can really help support that sustainable growth. So yeah. All right. Well, everyone have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you at the next webinar.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.